Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Wah Mountain, just north of Cotopaxi, Colorado, around 80 miles south of Denver. This particular part of the Pike and San Isabel National Forest displays steep and rugged mountains covered in pine and fir trees predominantly. There are pockets of willow, aspen, and various berry bushes wherever water is present. The mountains are packed with deer and elk, but authorities are uncertain about just how many black bears live in the state of Colorado. Colin McClelland was from a very outdoorsy family. His father was a licensed outfitter in Colorado for 13 years, and Colin was a lumberjack and camped on Wah Mountain because he harvested timber from nearby timber stands. Colin had been working out of this area for several years and had a rash of bear problems for the last 3. He called the Colorado Division of Wildlife last year when a bear broke into his camper and consumed all of his food. Lately, he had been having bears show up around his RV at night and scratch and sniff around his camp. Colin was smart enough to know not to leave anything that might attract a bear outside, but his camper was full of his own food as well, so he thought that is what must be bringing them back. Colin didn't know this, but 4 nuisance black bears were sedated, ear-tagged, then relocated to Wah Mountain since 1988. Now authorities know that 1 was run over and killed in the road, hunters killed 2 during hunting season, but 1 bear simply disappeared. This is the ideal situation for the wildlife management authorities. They don't exactly like killing bears, even nuisance bears, as it is better to give them a second chance in a more remote area and allow nature to take its course. Any new entrant into prime bear territory will have to fit in with the established bear pecking order and may die if it doesn't do so soon after being released. Colin hadn't been feeling well the last few days and was taking some pretty strong flu medicine to help him recover. Harvesting lodgepole pines was tiring work, and being sick while doing it made it even more tiring. On top of that, Colin had had several run-ins with local black bears. It was fairly normal for him to hear them sniffing around at night, but they had become more aggressive and more frequent in their visits. It almost seemed like they had accepted him as part of their surroundings, and now they were just going to treat him like they do every other animal. The respect boundaries would definitely have to be reestablished, but first he would need to recover from this flu. On Friday, August 13th, 1993, Colin prepared dinner over the stove in his camper. He thought about how he would have to climb back on top of his RV and sleep up there again. He had to do it the last several nights due to all the bear activity at night, and he didn't feel safe inside of it. His friends had recently loaned him a rifle big enough to handle any bears that might give him any problems, but he was sure they would just move on once they figured out that he wasn't going to feed them or bother them. He just wanted to be left alone to do his work. After eating dinner, Colin felt too sick to try the climb to the roof, so he decided to take the flu medicine and sleep inside the RV. He loaded up on a decent dose of flu medicine and promptly crawled into bed. Hopefully this would be the last night that he would be so sick and lose work. As Colin drifted off to sleep, the aroma from the dinner he cooked wafted gently up the valley, through the trees, and into the noses of bears in the area. A 240-pound black bear, very familiar with Colin's camp, decided he would wander through and look for something easy to eat, and admired the delicious aromas emanating from the giant metal box. As the boar approached, it sniffed around the perimeter of the RV, and there wasn't any area where the scent of food was particularly strong. That is, until he sniffed the air coming from the crack in the door. The bear wasn't hesitant about getting at that food, and immediately set his claws in the crack of the door and began prying at it. The noise of the bear prying at the door brought the medically induced slumber of Collins to a terrifying end. He sat up in bed and watched the door bend as the bear pulled and wrenched at the bottom. He quickly grabbed the rifle his friend loaned him and fired a shot through the door at where he thought the bear would be. This did not slow the bear down, as it continued to pull at the door. The locking mechanism finally failed due to the power of the bear, and the door flew open. The bear didn't pause to sniff around at what made the aroma in the air. It didn't lick any bowls or plates, nor did it raid the fridge for a snack. The hungry boar immediately attacked Colin while he was still near his bed. The fight was not a long one. The bear immediately crushed Colin's skull and took his life. The authorities say it could have been related to food, but probably also had a factor of exerting dominance over Colin. The bear consumed part of Colin while in the RV, and then went and bedded down to sleep off his feast for a day or so. It then returned and fed again on Colin's remains. The third time the bear returned to Colin's RV, he dragged the young man's remains out about 30 yards from the entrance. A few days later, Colin's friends showed up to check on him and see if he was feeling better. They were saddened to see his remains as they approached his RV. They immediately contacted authorities to report the passing of their friend. Wildlife management officers set a live catch trap near Colin's trailer and immediately killed the bear that was caught. This bear was a very healthy 240-pound boar black bear and had been shot in its side. The bullet wound was about the same height as the bullet hole through the RV door. Its blood was tested for a protein present after eating human flesh, and the protein was not present. Nothing was in the bear's digestive tract except the bait that was used in the trap. Authorities are not sure if they have the bear who killed Colin or not. The only other bear tracks around his RV were from a smaller sow. After performing a necropsy on the carcass, authorities would call this bear in fantastic shape, and roly-poly, and even chunky, as well as way better than average when commenting about the health and fitness of the bear. Authorities urge calm and say that if you see a bear with a tag in its ear and are planning on calling authorities to deal with it, they'll kill that bear. The tag in its ear is placed the first time they have a nuisance call about the bear. There is a 2-strike rule they use when it comes to nuisance bears. Division of Wildlife Officer Rob Velarde says that people are becoming more tolerant when speaking of the bears in the area. Al McClellan, Colin's father, says, "I can't get back my son. That's a done deal. But this business of killing bears is not any different than killing Indians, and that's how we won the West. It's just a continuation of that line of thought. I don't believe the answer is killing bears," McClellan says. "I think the answer is limiting development." He's come out suggesting a moratorium on subdivisions and building permits until an environmental impact study can analyze the stressors that affect wildlife such as bears. The last recorded bear fatality in Colorado prior to this was in 1971. In 1992, Colorado voters voted to ban hunting bears over bait with hounds and in spring or summer seasons. This leaves only the fall for hunters to harvest bears. Colorado Wildlife Management authorities are currently evaluating a zone-based plan to balance black bear populations across the state. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the beautiful woods of western North Carolina and the backcountry of the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. This area is 522,000 acres of mountainous country and, according to geologists, some of the oldest land formations on Earth. The plant life consists of an amazing canopy composed of oak, maple, pine, and hickory trees, and a very dense undergrowth of magnolia, dogwood, holly, and azalea bushes, amongst many others. The array of plant life is both beautiful and aromatic. The animal life consists of white-tailed deer, rabbits, raccoons, possums, beavers, and other small forest dwellers. The top predator of the area is the black bear. It is this beautiful and wild backdrop that made the Great Smoky Mountain National Park the most visited national park in the U.S. park system. Yes, even more than Yellowstone, believe it or not. The Great Smoky Mountain National Park had around 12.2 million visitors in 2020. Patrick Madura was a 43-year-old man from Elgin, Illinois. He had his master's degree in biology and was trained as an EMT and firefighter. Patrick was scheduled to stay at remote Hazel Creek Campground, number 82, which was reserved for one person from September 8th through September 11th, 2020. At remote campgrounds, there isn't always oversight as to who is coming and who is going. There might be a camp host or a ranger on site, or there might be no one around for days. When a camper makes a reservation, it is more of a verifiable formality than anything rigorously enforced. Campers at these kinds of sites wouldn't have it any other way, as that is why they're there, for less people and more nature. Patrick arrived at his chosen camping spot and pitched his tent and rolled out his sleeping bag according to his plans. He chose a campsite close to a creek and on the edge of a small meadow, but not too far from the trail, so he could have easy access to it when he was ready. As far as anybody knew, Patrick was enjoying himself and the natural surroundings of the remote campground he chose. On September 11th, a small group of hikers passed by on the trail near Patrick's campsite when they noticed his tent and site and decided to investigate. The campsite seemed eerily quiet as Patrick's single-person tent flap swayed in the breeze. They looked inside and noticed his sleeping bag placed where it should be, and nothing seemed to be out of place in the tent. The hikers then noticed that the grass on the backside of the tent was flattened out. It looked like there was a wrestling match that occurred there. But this apparently was much more serious of a confrontation than a friendly wrestling match, as the hikers observed the grass matted down with a clear drag trail, and there was blood on the drag trail. It all seems to lead directly down to the creek. At this point, they noticed a bear across the creek, probably only about 30 yards away. The bear seemed distracted as it chewed on something obscured by the grass and bushes. The bear continually glanced toward the hikers and back. It was then that the hikers decided to leave the area to find a cell signal and call authorities. They finally reached someone by 7 p.m., and investigators were sent out the next day. As investigators and officials arrive at the remote camping site, they observe a 240-pound male black bear scavenging off the partially decomposed remains of Patrick Madura. The bear was euthanized and its corpse sent off for analysis. Patrick's remains were collected and sent to the coroner for analysis as well. The coroner's report took just over a year to complete and compile. In the examination, the coroner focused on the reaction of the tissues around the puncture and bite wounds. It was noted that the wounds were received before death had occurred, as the tissues at the wound sites hemorrhaged. Patrick exhibited lacerated puncture wounds and blunt force trauma to his head, neck, and nearly every other portion of his body. His ribs were fractured during the attack, as they also exhibited hemorrhaging. His left lung also had bruising, hemorrhaging, and blunt force trauma. Patrick's scalp had lacerations as well as his finger, back, and legs. The bear bit him from head to toe. His brain, heart, and lungs showed no evidence of any natural disease, which means he was in good health overall. Patrick's fatal bear attack was only the second in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park's 80-year history. Since 1990, there have been 57 black bears euthanized in the park, mostly for malnourishment and injury. The park does its best to make sure visitors are safe by recommending hikers use the aerial storage cables provided by the park to cache their food, educating visitors on proper bear response, and closing backcountry campsites whenever bear activity is high in the area. Additional precautions include hiking in groups of 3 or more, carrying bear spray, following backcountry closures, storing food appropriately, and keeping your distance from bears. Authorities say if you're attacked by a black bear, you should defend yourself with anything available. You should also look large by raising your hands above you and standing tall. And finally, do not run or turn away from a bear, as this may stimulate a predatory response. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Poison Bay on Chickagoff Island in southeast Alaska. The ABC Islands, as they are referred to by locals, are Afognak, Baranof, and Chickagoff Islands, and they make up a closely positioned island group. The plants of the Chickagoff Island range from pine and fir trees to alder, willow, blueberry, and devil's club, amongst many others. This area is a typical temperate rainforest with nearly 50 inches of rainfall per year and average January temperatures of 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Off the shore, you may observe sea lions, sea otters, and seals. On land, you might see Sitka black-tailed deer, brown bear, and an abundance of small fur-bearing animals. The brown bears on this island are a very unique population, as scientists have proven them to be more closely related to polar bears than any other brown bear group. This may explain their proclivity to hunt humans. Thomas Puerto was a tree thinner with the Forestry Service. His responsibilities were to go through a previously logged area and thin out the trees that were growing back to allow for better growth and less competition. His days were spent roaming through the small stands of forests, cutting out one of a group of trees that are too close to grow healthily. His campmates nominated him to run to town to buy camp groceries, which meant that he would drive the 13-foot-long whaler across the bay for about an hour and buy the groceries and then return with new supplies. A trip that totaled about 2.5 hours. He left on Thursday, mid-afternoon. Thomas made it to the store safely and purchased the needed groceries. He loaded them in the skiff and headed back across the flat waters back to Peril Strait. He would soon be back to camp, to the happy faces of workers welcoming the new supply of groceries. A few miles into his return trip, the engine of his boat began to act erratically. He knew that the currents of the passages between the islands were very strong, and he may be swept out to sea if caught in them, in a tide change. He decided the safest thing to do would be to motor into a bay or cove and work on the engine until he could get it working reliably. He had a few tools, but no firearm, nor any bear spray. Not sure you can blame him, given he was in a boat and there aren't many bears that hunt in the ocean. His boat sputtered its way into Poison Cove on southern Chichagof Island, which, on top of its curious name, is a very round-shaped cove. A cove is defined as a small, sheltered bay, so it is easy to understand the protection Thomas was hoping for once he arrived. Once he anchored his boat near the shore, he lifted the hood on the engine and began working. He worked on it for a while and decided it was getting chilly and would need to start up a fire to help signal rescuers and keep warm. He gathered firewood from the area and piled it up and started a campfire. He took some of the groceries out and had a meal and worked on the engine while he waited for a passing boat or someone to notice he was missing to find him. Now Thomas left Peril Strait on Thursday toward mid-afternoon, and it was now midday the following Sunday. His campmates reported him missing and authorities were notified. On October 14th, a group of people who were passing by Poison Cove noticed an unoccupied skiff beached on the shore and sailed toward it to investigate. They looked along the shore and saw no one and decided to anchor and go ashore. As they approached the skiff, they could see a fire had been made on the beach, but was out now. Some food was near the fire, as if someone had been preparing a small meal while sitting by the fire. Then they noticed a strange disruption in the plants just a few feet away in the grass. There were signs of a struggle, with plants and soil torn up and disturbed, and an obvious trail where it looked as if something had been dragged back into the brush. They slowly investigated the drag trail, but a few yards into the bush, they were confronted by a large sow brown bear and 2 of her yearling cubs. The bears were behaving aggressively toward the group, so the group ran back to the beach and boarded their boat to radio authorities. The authorities responded to Poison Cove and retraced the route the group from the boat had used. They looked the camp on the beach over and made their way up to the drag trail a short distance and found the disturbed soil and plant life, as well as some of Thomas's clothing, a little further back. About 50 yards from the beach they found the partially consumed remains of Thomas. It was what bear experts would call cached, meaning the bears had eaten their fill, then scraped up surrounding soil and debris to pile over the remains, while marking it with their own urine and feces to deter other animals from consuming it. The Alaska State Troopers, as well as the Sitka Mountain Rescue, helped secure the kill site and recover Thomas's body. His head and parts of his body were significantly consumed, so identification of his remains was initially completed using identification documents on his person. His body was taken to the Alaska State Coroner's Office for an official statement regarding his cause of death. Evidence was gathered from the scene as well for examination in order to find the right bears involved. On the following day, authorities found one of the year-old cubs involved in the incident and shot and killed it. They tried to shoot the sow as well, but they could not get a good shot. The bear's body was removed for a necropsy to see if they could connect it to Thomas's death. No further evidence could be found regarding the fate of the sow and her remaining yearling cub. Authorities are very concerned because once a bear has killed and consumed a person, the odds of the bear repeating an attack on a human rise substantially. The cub could live another 25 years, and that may put several people in jeopardy. There are currently estimated to be 4,155 brown bears on Chichagof Island, with approximately 2,000 square miles of land. That is just about 2 bears for every square mile. This makes the island the most concentrated population of bears on Earth. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there. especially in bear country.